right, thank you. We're ready for our first session this afternoon. And as you might recall, the format that we follow during these panel discussions is that first we will hear from representatives of federal agencies or federal departments who will present a national perspective on the session theme. Then secondly, we'll hear from a representative from industry who will present the corporate perspective. And then lastly, we'll hear from URI faculty and graduate student researchers who will discuss how URI's unique research capabilities in a wide range of cyber-related areas can impact on the panel theme and other outstanding issues of the day. So our next panel is entitled Cyber Forensics, and it's chaired by Professor Victor Fay-Wolfe from our Department of Computer Science, who also serves as the director of the URI Digital Forensics Center. And I'm going to ask Victor if he would come forward and introduce each of the members of this panel. Dr. Wolfe.
Thank you, Peter. We have a panel today on cyber forensics. Before I introduce the panel, let me just give you some idea of what we're going to be talking about. This is a quote from the report that Congressman Langevin co-authored, the 2-year update on the state of cybersecurity under this presidency. And I found this quote and I thought it was a nice introduction into what cyber forensics is. It says, short of armed conflict, nation states are unlikely to launch a cyber attack against the United States. And the next paragraph goes on to say that the greatest threat remains espionage and cybercrime. And we heard that from several of the speakers this morning. The stolen secrets are where we're really getting hit. We haven't had a major offensive against us in cyberspace, but we continually have espionage and theft of intellectual property, government secrets. Cybercrime. So the title of today's panel that we're going to do right now is called Cyber Forensics. A lot of cybersecurity talks about preventing incidents from occurring, but if and when they occur, it's often important to find out who, what, when, where, how. That's forensic science. It's an investigation to find out what happened in the incident, who did it, and hopefully lead to prosecution. So today's panel is going to be about cyber forensics. So we put together we considered some of the experts in the area to bring in, and that's what I'd like to introduce to you today. The first speaker will be Jeff Troy. Jeff is the Deputy Assistant Director of the FBI Cyber Division, and as that, he manages the cyber national security and cyber criminal programs for the FBI. Jeff is a URI graduate. Our next speaker will be Dan Dickerman. Dan is a special agent for the IRS. He is technical advisor to the head of the IRS Computer Crimes and developed a lot of the training done at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center and is a regular instructor there. Dan is a URI graduate. The third speaker will be Alan White. Alan is the Director of Network Security for North America for Dell SecureWorks. SecureWorks was rated the #1 private security company in the United States, actually right before Dell bought them, and that's probably not coincidental. And Alan is the Director of Consulting for North America. Alan is a URI graduate. I will be speaking fourth, and then we'll have Kevin Bryan, one of our graduate students, come in. So not only do you have a panel of experts in front of you, but we're very proud to have a panel of URI graduates to talk to you about what's happening in cyber forensics. So with that, Jeff.
Thank you, Victor. There you go. So good afternoon. I know it's a little difficult sometimes coming back after lunch to get started, but I noticed all the cookies are gone, so I know there's a sugar high that should at least get me the 15 minutes I need to get through this. I also want to say that it's really great to be back where people can understand my accent. I don't have to stop and say that car word, what that meant. So it's very important. So I have about a 45-minute speech and 15 minutes to give it. So I'll try and get through it as quick as I can. And one of the things I'm going to be doing is kind of plowing through areas that I think may have been touched on by some of the other speakers of the panel. Briefly, what I'll be talking about is what the FBI cyber program does, what our strategy is. I'll talk about the cyber threat environment, and then finally, as I talk about that threat environment, I'll be trying to relate it all to the forensics program and what some of the things are that we're using right now, and maybe spark some ideas in terms of the types of tools and other process improvements that we need to help us become more effective in what we're doing. So in terms of what the FBI strategy is right now, we are not focused really at all on victims, which may sound unusual because everybody's getting hit, right? We have people that are creating incredible technologies, defense products inside the United States. They're having that intellectual property stolen, but that's really not where we're focusing our efforts. What we try and do is to get all the data that we can, forensically obtained data, and put all of that into databases, which allows us to really start to group the signatures, and you heard the general talk about that a little bit, so that we can understand exactly how many groups are out there and what these groups look like that are attacking us. And then what we do is we put that together and we try and identify the actual infrastructure that they're using to come in and attack the United States. Once you find that infrastructure, then you can work your way back to actually trying to figure out who these people are, what their intentions are, and then start to put strategies together that can help us defend ourselves. So how we've done that is we organize ourselves in what we call threat focus groups, or threat focus cells. If you went to the FBI 4 years ago and you went to our headquarters to talk to somebody, you would find that they would tell you, hey, I help the people in Boston and New York and Albany, or I help the people in Los Angeles and San Francisco and San Diego with their cyber problems. They come in, I'm at headquarters, I get them funding, or I get them what they need. And we took that model and we said, this is not working, this isn't helping us get to where we need to get. And so we created these groups by identifying what we thought were the biggest threats that we had, and then just creating subject matter experts against each of the groups that we think are making up that threat, the actual people. Now those groups, then they realized very quickly that we inside the FBI did not have the skills or the expertise to do what it was that we needed to do to attack this infrastructure. And so we started doing a lot more collaboration, a lot more building out outreach between government agencies, private industries, et cetera. And now these threat focus cells are huge intergovernmental public-private groups that have had tremendous successes in really cutting down the threat, providing some mitigation strategies. However, I don't want to give you a false sense that in any way that this has stopped the problem, because this is just an incredibly difficult problem to solve right now, and I don't have any comfort that it's going to be solved in the very near future. All right, in terms of the technical sophistication, as you all know, the amount of capacity just continues to increase in terms of terabytes of storage capabilities, and the programs that are being developed continue to go higher and higher in terms of their lines of code. I was talking with a friend of mine that works at Microsoft, and their operating systems at this point in time have about 50 million lines of code in them. And when you think of 50 million lines of code, and the fact that there's a vulnerability in about every 10,000 lines of code, then you can just see how many holes are that can be exploited, and what a difficult problem that is for us all to be able to try and fill all those holes while they continue to just come through and attack. Porting of apps, again, is another problem. So you have somebody that's developing a program, and it already has its own flaws, right? If there's one flaw in every 10,000 lines of code, then you have that issue. And they developed that particular tool, say, for the iPhone. And now they want to take that same app and they want to go put it on the Android system. And so you have an inherently flawed program now being converted to go on a system that it wasn't even supposed to be on. And it has even more flaws in it, and you create additional problems. And we know people are just out right now to try and make as much money as they can on that app, because the life of that app may only be 2 to 3 years. So again, it creates more problems for us. People aren't thinking about security. They're thinking, how long can I put this tool out there that people will use so I can make as much money off of it? Encryption, another huge problem for us. It's incredibly low cost, and now what we're seeing is a lot of the companies that are developing operating systems are putting encryption in there, and they're just making it more easier for people to use. And the more people that jump onto the encryption bandwagon are just creating, again, more difficulties for us as we try and penetrate the actual communication systems of the groups that are attacking the United States. The white hat dilemma. What we have now is a lot of researchers who are out there who are doing their work, finding the vulnerabilities, and then they have this dilemma. Do I publish that I just found this vulnerability, or do I go and notify the company that has this software program and say, hey, there's a vulnerability here, you need to patch it? And what if I tell them and they don't patch it? How long do I wait? There's a group that just got started up. It's out there on the internet called the 0-Day Initiative. And they collect all of this information, and they're struggling with it. They're thinking, well, maybe we should give people up to 6 months to patch it. However, there's some researchers up there who believe, no, if I've given you 7 days and you haven't patched it, why should the rest of the world have to be at risk? Because maybe someone else can come up with their own patch and fix it themselves. So another huge problem, and again, one that won't be solved in the short term. And even for those vulnerabilities that they find, the average patching time for a vulnerability is about 38 days. So when these get out and shared amongst the hacker community, it continues to offer large groups of people pathways into the systems. And finally, the kits. So the kits are a real concern, because what we're seeing is that people who are low skilled but highly motivated, people that just want to engage in criminal activity, or as the general mentioned, there was some questions earlier about terrorists. Well, they may not have a lot of good skills, but now that you can go out and just buy a Zeus kit or the Spy Eye, the next big competitor to Zeus, then you end up with this problem that there are people who now really have the ability to outsource that technical skill and to get them further into the game. The capacity issue, which I briefly touched on earlier, the low cost of that creates a huge problem. And now with the consolidation of information into the cloud, you again end up with I think, a very significant problem, because companies are all looking at the cloud and they're saying, this looks like a great solution. I can consolidate my information. I can get rid of a lot of my employees. I can take my risk of having information in my computer system, and I can put that risk on somebody else. And that way, I won't have to worry if I get my data stolen, but hopefully it won't be stolen, because they'll have that much more talent, and they'll be able to, put a lot of people who are just focused on security, putting the walls up around my data. And isn't that great? The only thing I'd like to point out, if you have a chance, go out to Google and read the Terms of Service Agreement. It's about 400 million pages long. But if you get a chance to read it, read where it talks about the liability. Because if you're outsourcing your risk, if you outsource anything, the reason that you outsource it is to reduce your risk. And what Google has in their terms of service is that they will provide the same security for your information that they provide for theirs. And we all know that Google's been hacked. If you go to Amazon's, they will tell you that they provide, they are absolutely not liable for any of the information that you put up in their cloud. So there's a big question here as to why are people moving to the cloud, if in fact the people who are providing you that service are not giving you any level of comfort greater than the discomfort that you're suffering right now trying to protect your own data. The number of devices with storage capacity. That also creates a huge problem for us in the cybercrime environment. From picture frames to refrigerators to thermostats, whatever it is right now, there's the potential that something's being stored inside those devices, and it's creating, as you go out onto crime scenes, more and more challenges as to try and figure out where it is that all of this particular data that we're searching for can be located. And then the processing capacity has dramatically increased. So going back to the Amazon example, right now you can rent that capacity of cloud computing power, and in just a matter of less than an hour, you may be able to get enough capacity to crack an 8-digit PIN, for example, and that may just cost you, a couple $100. So that creates another challenge for us in terms of giving the tools that are being created for all the good reasons, all the things that General talked about in terms of medical advances or whatever, and we're giving all those tools being freely made available to the bad guys, and creates huge, huge issues. The other problems that we have in terms of the cloud have to do with the legal and jurisdictional issues right now. So as cloud service providers continue to take your data and move it off to many different places, we start to have the legal questions of when we get a search warrant, where exactly does that data reside? So if the attack is coming from the Ukraine and we have a victim here in Rhode Island, however, their cloud storage is somewhere in Arizona and the redundant server sits somewhere in California, these are legal concepts that no one ever dreamed of as they drafted all of the rules of criminal procedure, and we start to look at all of the tools that we have to legally go out and start to enforce these problems. I can tell you that pretty much for the last 48 hours, I've been dealing exactly with these issues. We are trying to move forward on an aggressive operation for the FBI in the cybercrime world, trying to take on a challenge that hasn't been accomplished before. And these are the exact issues that we have to wrestle with. How can we use these tools in our legal system to make sure that we're not violating people's privacy, but at the same point in time, we're successfully reducing this threat. And lastly, in the volume of attacks has dramatically increased, and the shape of the organizations have changed. What we have right now is there's a lot of hacktivists out there. When you looked at the Estonia problem, yes, there were people who were inside the Soviet government, the Russian government, that a lot of people were looking and saying they may have been the source of attacks. But in the explanations as to what happened, many people were saying, well, it was actually just private people who took up the cause and became hacktivists, and they got in on the DDoSing of that entire country. With the group Anonymous, what they've done is they've set up a tool, and anybody can come and get that tool. And whenever someone in the group says, hey, let's go after Walmart or Bank of America or whatever company is that they feel they have a disagreement with their philosophy and how they run their company or their business, they begin the DDoS attacks and they start to run their operations. How do you stop a group that really doesn't have a leader? That's a huge challenge for us. How do you stop a group that's located all across the globe and has so many different opportunities in terms of where they can put their communications channels and how they can initiate these criminal acts? A very huge challenge. Many countries now are getting in the game. I know we often hear about Russia and China. China's constantly talked about. How hard is it, though, to take a dozen young people and to send them to school and get them to understand how it is to get into this game? How hard is it to go out and just start buying some of the tools, which, the bad guys, they're more than happy to take the money. They really don't care who it is. And so now what we're seeing is many, many countries are saying we have to build this capability and we have to build it quickly. So let's start to put our teams together. That's going to change the game in terms of how does the United States solve the problem. I mean, to have a discussion with one other country that you think stealing a lot of your intellectual property is one issue, but how do you have it amongst the globe? And so that creates the issue of net norms, what's going to be allowed and what's not going to be allowed. And it puts forth the other problem of at what point do we go back and attack another computer and are we prepared for what the response could be if someone were to say, well, if they're going to do that, then we're going to push this button, and then things start escalating. And those are huge issues. The United States is doing a lot to try and address that problem. The State Department has recently named the former assistant to the cyber czar at the White House to actually take a role of trying to help coordinate the whole United States diplomatic outreach around the globe to address this problem. Okay, so in terms of improving the forensic processes, some of the things that have happened really in the last year that I think have tremendously helped us kind of change up what we're doing, cut the amount of time that it takes us to do our investigations, and improve our efficiencies. Probably the first thing has been on-site triage. So prior to using on-site triage, we would go out with a warrant, we would get a computer, you take the computer back, you put it through a full forensic analysis. It could take months before you knew what was going on. What we do now is we go out and we use special tools to put like a write blocker on the computer and just query it. Hey, what was the last 100 IP addresses that this computer went to? What was the last 100 Word documents that were written? Those kinds of questions that could give the investigators who are right on site the ability to say, you know what, I could ask the bad guy a question or two here, and it might significantly advance the investigation, because when we're at a search, it's usually a high-stress time for whoever's house you're at, and it can sometimes create the opportunity for them to provide us some information that will, as I said, help to get the case going a lot faster. Similarly, we take the triage concept even back to our office and say, do we still need to do a full forensics? I know we only did that short piece on site, but is there another like mid-range piece we could do that could help possibly get the person to plead so that we don't have to go to trial and then have the full forensics done? Those strategies are helping. It takes a lot for us to change our systems and to measure our ability to succeed using these tools and become more efficient, but we're finding those are starting to really provide some positive payback for us. Consolidation of analysis. We have a lot of tool sharing now. The FBI did a malware analysis project. We went around to our 56 field offices and we said, what are each one of you doing with your malware? And we're finding there were just too many different ways that people were trying to get it analyzed. Many people had just created their own little solutions, which, you know, one side you got to really applaud people. They got the job done shortly. But now as the problem emerges and becomes bigger and bigger, we had to bring all of that into a central system and start to see if we could find efficiencies, and we did. And we also then got all of the malware analysis results into a central repository, and that too has helped so we can finally say, you know what, you're working the same case right now in Los Angeles that they're working in Boston. You couldn't tell it before because no one had consolidated some of the analysis that you had, but now we know it's the same case, and we can shift resources to one place or the other and move the case forward. In terms of data sharing, the FBI started something called the NCI-JTF, the National Cyber Investigative Joint Task Force, about 4 years ago. It's located in Chantilly, Virginia. That is where the FBI, the Secret Service, and 15 intelligence agencies have all come together under one umbrella. We've taken the authorities, so we have intelligence community authorities, we have military authorities, and we have the investigative authorities of the FBI, all placed under one roof, where people have brought their systems together, and we're able to now utilize all of the different skill sets, talents, and the data collection capabilities of all these agencies to paint for us the actual picture of what the threat is and see who has the best capability to help us penetrate into these different pieces of infrastructure and again, move us further down the road. You'd be proud of your government. I can't share with you all of the things that go on there because of the classification, but it has been an incredibly fruitful project, and as I said, it's really helped to define what the issues are, and that helps us better define what our strategy is to address the problem. In private to private, we have a lot of companies that are now starting to share more of their data to solve the problems, and in the government to private initiatives like the one the FBI has going on in Pittsburgh called the National Cyber Forensics Training Alliance and the FBI are co-located in Pittsburgh, right outside of Carnegie Mellon. And in that area, all the private companies have come together under the umbrella of the NCFTA, and the FBI actually rents space right on that floor. And so as the companies are throwing their data in and saying, hey, we're getting hit by this ACH threat or this pump and dump scheme or whatever it is that's starting to get them, they're putting the data together and literally walking across the carpet, knocking on the door of an FBI agent saying, this needs to be addressed immediately. And we're able to really understand the impact that those cyber threats are having on corporate America. So it's been a great partnership. Lastly, some of the tools that are out there that are really starting to provide us with more visibility into the problem. The MCARTA tool is a tool that Carnegie Mellon developed, and we, as I mentioned, as we were looking at trying to consolidate all of our malware analysis, we have all of our field offices now having to use this tool, and we created a portal so they can get that malware sent over and analyzed in a very short term. Within 48 hours, we can find out what the malware did. We may not know all the signatures inside of it, but at least we'll understand what the malware does, and that helps us leapfrog the investigation. We're going to take that tool right now and we're going to open it up for free to anybody that's in InfraGard, which is about a 30,000 member organization that the FBI has around the country for people who want to address security threats in whatever industry that they have. We expect that that tool will be utilized extensively by the people in InfraGard, which will again help us paint the picture even more clearly. It'll help us to watch emerging threats as they occur, as people are putting in kinds of similar malware that just gets identified. So it's a tremendous win, I think, as again, everyone can use the same tool and we can put the results of that into a common portal. Some of these other off-the-shelf programs have helped, FTK Imager, a new FTKA product, and finally Afterlife, as I was doing some research and getting prepared to do this, I thought was one of the most innovative things. So we've always dealt with the problem of what's going on in RAM. We're finding more and more malware just exists in RAM. And in fact, when you boot up the computer, it goes into RAM, it does its thing. When the computer's done, it shuts down, it disappears. So Afterlife was a program where people said, maybe there's a way to grab what's in RAM even after the computer's turned off. And I just love the idea of somebody taking on a problem that everyone would say, how the heck could you possibly do that? But they figured out a way. They have about a 60% success rate of pulling out some of the data that's in RAM after a computer's been shut off. So those are the kinds of creative wins that we're looking for as people can continue to bring these types of tools back and help us further our investigations. So again, thank you very much for your time, and I'll jump up to the next page. Thank you.
My name is Dan Dickerman. I'm from the IRS. I'm here to help make sure you guys get your Social Security number at the door when you leave. I do a lot of talks in the field of computer forensics. One of the questions that I often get is, why is the IRS here? Oh, sorry, need to use the mic. I get the question often, why is the IRS here talking to me about computer forensics? And let me first give you a little background of myself, and then I want to get into that. I've been a special agent with the IRS for approximately 15 years, a little bit over that, both in New York, Georgia, and now here in Rhode Island. I'm assigned to our headquarters and spend a lot of time in D.C. I've been using computers since I grew up, about 25 years, and for about the past 15 years been doing computer forensics. Conducted thousands of computer forensic examinations, and I've been teaching computer forensics since around 1999. Currently, I am in charge of the joint Homeland Security Treasury Computer Forensic Training Program, where we train all of the computer forensic examiners from Homeland Security, from Secret Service, from the Immigration Customs Enforcement Agency, and the IRS. And because I'm here in Rhode Island, I've spent the last about 7 years working with the university to develop the forensic program here at URI, which Professor Fay-Wolfe is in charge of. Well, in the beginning,
way back before anyone in this room even owned a computer, the IRS had the need to deal with computer evidence, and that's why IRS, although we don't get a lot of publicity, actually is the forefathers of computer forensics. I have an example up here of actually one of the first ever graduate certificates of our computer forensic program, where IRS required their examiners, the students, to actually recover their own diploma. And if they didn't recover their own diploma, they didn't graduate. So we had the need to go into businesses and recover, analyze, and capture digital evidence off of business computer systems, as I said before, any regular home user ever owned computers. This spawned from just IRS skills into all of the treasury agencies that existed at the time. Now, we've had a breakup of the government into a new organization called Homeland Security, and unfortunately most of our partners in this have split off, but we all still train together. Back when this program started, we had alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, the Customs Service, the Inspector Generals, the IRS, and the Secret Service, all putting our brains together and learning from each other about the different types of investigations that we would encounter, whether it was a threat email to the president, or someone downloading instructions on how to make a bomb, or child pornography trading online, and so on. And then, of course, IRS, we do financial crimes. So by partnering all of these agencies together, we were able to share expertise and resources. And through that came the development of tools and procedures. Forensics didn't exist. We created it within the law enforcement community. And back when I first started, back in the 80s when this program started, and then on through the 90s, the skills of computer forensics were almost exclusively within the law enforcement community. And it isn't until more recently that those skills have moved on out into the private sector, and academic programs have been developed, and private companies are now teaching and performing forensics. And most of that is because these people that started the program retired, moved on, and then taught those on the outside. Now, forensics initially was actually simple in comparison to today's challenges. We dealt primarily with standalone computers at first. Someone had a single computer. We didn't have network-based computing. We didn't have the internet as we know it today. Storage media was very basic. Floppy disks, CDs, individual hard drives, nothing really out of the ordinary. And our forensic tools were very antiquated at the time, very basic tools that really weren't designed for forensics. They were designed for data recovery, computer programming, and other things. And those ideas spawned into new forensic tools that were developed to help automate our process. So back then, you had minimal amounts of data being analyzed, and you had very simple tools to do the analysis. And by today's means, very slow computers to do it as well. Well, jumping into the 21st century, we have a totally different situation now. Our tools are much more refined. We have major companies developing faster, smarter, automated forensic tools. We have much faster computers to help us with processing. However, you have a cat and mouse process here where we get better tools, we get faster computers, but then what we're dealing with is harder to analyze. There's more data, and the exponential growth of data is an ever-growing challenge. We go from a single hard drive to going into a business that has a huge server room full of various network-attached storage devices. The data itself is becoming more complex. The software that we're analyzing becomes more complex. And of course, as Jeff and others have already mentioned, the dealing with encryption is an ongoing problem. And how do we address encryption? Are there ways around it? Are there ways to investigate things that are protected? by encryption. Well, computer forensics is moving at an alarming rate, and it has to stay current. And that's probably our biggest challenge: is how do we stay current? How do we move with the technology and train our people and build the tools that allow us to continue doing what are changing, the challenges are changing, and the law is trying to keep up. And as some of the other speakers have said, the laws are unfortunately way behind the technology. We are moving into a point where we have to make decisions. Also, do we have the time to analyze and actually do forensic analysis, or is the goal here to stop the threat, remediate, put these systems back in service as soon as possible? So that's part of the triage process, is trying to decide what's important, what's not, and making a judgment call as to whether or not we analyze. Some of the challenges of cyber forensics, because we are dealing with data coming across the wire, is how do we find the perpetrator, or how do we find the evidence? Is it encrypted? Do we have anonymous proxies hiding where this person is really coming from? And, of course, beyond jurisdictional boundaries. Forensics is never going to stop evolving. Some of the things that we're looking at now, and Jeff had just talked about a tool that does capturing of RAM, capturing of memory. Well, some of the forensic applications of that is, once you capture this memory, what do you do with it? It's not like a standard file system. It's just a big blob of data. And people are doing some very good research to try and learn how to parse that data. As we move on to more and more things like solid-state hard drives and thumb drives and larger storage, we have wear leveling, which is something that the not only forensic field needs to be concerned with, but intelligence and military and so on. When you throw away your thumb drive, even though you thought you wiped all the data off it, did you really wipe all the data off it? Or was wear leveling taking place and you've actually still got tons of data on that? And then on into quantum computing, and it goes on and on. We've just got unbelievable amounts of challenges ahead of us. Hopefully through things like partnerships, we can continue to address these. Law enforcement definitely can't do it alone anymore, and luckily we've seen a real growth in the academic programs around the country starting to teach forensics. We have a development of academic program here at URI, industry research, and also partnerships with various professional organizations. It's very important that we have the ability to partner with the IBM, the Verizon, the RSA, all the different companies that have expertise in certain areas, and some of the organizations here help with that. And then, of course, public awareness. There's no way that we can do it without getting the masses, those people at home that have their computer system, that have their Linksys router that is unsecured, that they just plugged in, and the password is admin. We need to get those people to start taking some responsibility, start having some type of qualification or at least basic understanding, so that they are not utilized to become the threat against the government or the threat against companies. Okay, so partnerships are definitely important. I'll be around later on. I guess we have a panel question and answer, so I know that we're probably a little bit behind. I'll move on to my next speaker, Alan White.
Well, good afternoon. There's so many distinguished guests. I just say hello to everyone, and I appreciate everyone's attendance. This is a great event to gather such an important topic of cybersecurity. I feel honored to speak here, from so many different angles. As a graduate, as I've worked here, and my military side, so this is kind of a great opportunity myself. We keep hearing it over and over. This is an evolving field. It's really a collection of multiple disciplines. When you think about that, all the different knowledge bases you need to have to kind of really focus on cybersecurity. I've got a few data points that I've collected. My message is really from the industry perspective. So these data points kind of reflect that. in 2010, so just December 2010, real recently here, Robert Half Technology Consulting did a survey of 14,000 CIOs. And the results thought that they would have a very tough time filling the security skill sets in the Q1 of 2011. This was emphasized again by the Enterprise Security Group, where they said 50% or more said they would have a tough time finding that right skill set as well. I think one of the bigger challenges that we see out there is that there's this many consulting specialists or people out there doing this type of work, and they're going independent. And that's okay, that's entrepreneurial, but it's really making it tough for the industry to really keep up with that challenge of filling those positions. Most of you are probably familiar with DICE, the online job board, and they ran a video along the same lines of the same problem of this shortage. And they kind of summarized it in 3 points, and I thought the first two were probably pretty predictable, but the third one was really interesting. The first one, they said, that, of course, you need technical skill sets, right? You need people who understand how to do this stuff. Second one was programming, which is definitely very important. But the third one, again, was really interesting to me, was how to think, or more like think like an attacker or a hacker. And that's a skill set that you just can't teach in a classroom all the time. I know from a Dell perspective, sometimes it could take almost 4 to 6 months to fill a position in the cybersecurity space. You get a lot of applicants, but it's really tough people who have been trained in the skill set and can bring that to the market quickly. A little about my background, like I mentioned, I also run a computer emergency response team for the Army National Guard, and in that role we get a lot of chance to work on bad things and be prepared to support both our Stay Around initiatives or incidents, as well as our Guard forces. Of course, I worked here before at the University of Round, and I'm a graduate. I know we've seen a lot about partnerships from an industry perspective. This is not also a common need. You'll see up here a lot of both, law enforcement and federal opportunities, and then of course different consortiums. What's kind of missing in our industry side, I would say, is probably a lot more EDU need. We do have some partnerships, particularly my company out of Dell, where we're out in Atlanta. We have some relationships. We have somebody in the Carnegie Mellon outside that office there in the FBI, but not enough. There's just not enough people working with the education industry. All right, so my point in my message is really two things, right? You've got threats and you've got needs. So I'm going to talk about the threats, and that'll help emphasize what the industry needs. When you look at what the threats are, here's what we're looking at here. You've got elite security, hackers, attackers. There's a whole bunch of names that we can give them, and you've seen printed out there. But what do they really specialize in? This malware creation. We've heard a lot about cyber espionage, exploit research, right? They're doing it for the bad reasons, not the good stuff. Hacktivism, we've seen a lot of that in the news. Cybercrime collectively has been a huge money-making opportunity. And that financial laundering opportunity, that's no small undertaking. And then the people who take care of those infrastructures. You think about a botnet, that could be as complicated as running a full-time server farm. I mean, that's what you're doing. You're maintaining thousands and thousands of computers that dynamically change at the drop of an instruction. That's very complicated, and the talent behind these groups is very high, and we're competing with that. I've got a few examples. I don't need you to really understand each piece of these diagrams, but what I will point out is what I think are some of the interesting challenges you face in the industry and that we're trying to solve. Point the right direction. Right here at the top, you've got your adversaries. That's your collection of bad folks. Like I said, there's a lot of individual skills there. If you actually sit down and think about all the parts it takes to successfully compromise a computer, it's very fascinating. So let's look at that for a second, because I think it helps you understand what the industry starts to face from a threat perspective. First, you got to be able to hop out of your bad spot, right? You need a proxy. You need some type of way to get out of your environment and not be seen by the government agencies, federal agencies, anybody who's going to look to take down your activity. Then you need different services, usually compromised, could be anywhere out there in the industry. We need web hosting, right? You got to host those spam sites, those redirects you get from advertisements. You need some exploits, right? You need to be able to put that code up there on the internet so that when you do direct somebody to it, they can get compromised from that malware code. Then the really dangerous stuff, the data collection. You're talking about personal identifiable information, company proprietary information, lots of data going out of the environment, and they need places to collect that stuff. They don't want to collect it on their own computers. You need command and control, right? Thousands of compromised computers. How do you tell them what to do? So you need that kind of element as well. And then you've all seen the spam, so you need to be able to deliver those messages to convince people to go ahead and click on things. And collectively, you've got your botnets, right? You've got thousands of computers out there ready to be used at the will of the bot master or the paid whoever's paying for that service. At the bottom here, you see the victim. They get attacked by the malware. They get it through either some email, they get it through USB storage. Really, a plethora of ways that they're getting this stuff. And as soon as we create a new way to defend against that, they figure out a new way to kind of present that material on systems. Here's an example. This has been used quite often. You could actually download this kit yourself and become your own malware threat attacker. But bottom line is that it's this tool called Poison Ivy, and basically it's just a remote access control tool for systems. You get malware on a person's computer, you can upload this software, and then very easily, with a nice GUI interface, you can take passwords, you can add content, you can glean for information on that system, figure out where you are in that network, figure out how you want to go next in that network, usually get to like the domain controller or really important computers, and then do your further criminal activities. Here's another common threat. Nothing against Google. This happens to Facebook and others. But you keep hearing about this new phrase called advanced persistent threat. What do we mean by that? What we mean by that is that malware that gets on your system that doesn't want anybody to know it's there. It's very stealth. It's not very loud, or it generally cannot be loud. And it sits in there for maybe months at a time, really getting an understanding of what's going on in the environment. A very low beacon out of the network, usually encrypted, and really hard to detect. With the Google particular one here, it was interesting. The attacker basically created an account at Google, uploaded some malware code to the Google code repository, used classic phishing scams to get people to click on it. Once you clicked on it, you went right to a trusted source like Google to go get your malware code, even report in or upload dangerous content. Once you were infected, basically the common theme of stealing out information, spreadsheets, PowerPoints, Excel, documents, these are real threats that we face all the time in our industry, and we're constantly helping people deal with. And you have to know how all these elements impact your environment in order to deal with them, because each one of them still poses a threat individually. This has been mentioned a few times, but here's a nice little visual of it. This is the low orbit ion cannon. Again, you could download this and turn yourself into a hacktivist overnight. In our labs, it took only 8 of these computers to take down one computer. So if you think about the bandwidth of a computer, 8 computers can take down one. If you think about the industry, that's why a lot of these attacks were very successful, because they could amass a large amount of attack from such a simple tool out there on the internet. But it's not just about hacktivism, too. It's about money, right? It's about making money. And what we're seeing a lot, and I'm sure the FBI has as well, is a lot of ACH and wire fraud transactions. When those hackers get on those systems, they know how to find the right person in your environment who does, say, pays the bills to your organization, sends money to different accounts, to different business entities. They find those systems, they get on there, 2-factor authentication, 3-factor authentication. Once they're on the system, they figure out how to work smartly around those security tools and basically then do lots of damage financially. Some of these are old, but as you can see, even $500,000 to $1 million a week is pretty good earning for these crew. So let's talk about our industry needs. We've got an elite attack force that we're working against, so we need an elite force of people who can deal with this. I mean, there's been lots of talk about this today, and I could say firsthand from being in the industry, it's a definite challenge. Just look at the areas that we need. Malware analysis, right? You need it overnight. Malware analysis is a huge field. Be able to reverse engineering, taking those programming skills you took in the classroom and saying, now I want to do that in reverse. I remember when as a student here at university, working with assembly, I thought that was, really low-level stuff. Well, sure enough, it shows up again when you're doing reverse engineering. You're actually looking at where things are put in memory and registers and going, wow, I remember that stuff from the classroom. So it's a real need out there. It's really an application of that classroom information. Counterintelligence. How do you stay out of the visibility of the attackers? Nothing against H.B. Gary, but they became very visible when the attacker community went after them, right? So it's a real challenge to also stay not at the forefront of being visible to the attackers and what you're doing and how you're gathering the information. It's been said over and over again about the forensics. The challenges that we're facing are astronomical. The size of the data sets we have to analyze. We need smart people coming out of the EDU space and coming into the industry. Threat modeling statistics. How do you take a massive haystack of data and logs and pull out that needle in that haystack that says, this is the bad thing, this is what's coming next? We would say in our industry, and we monitor thousands of computers and clients all over the world, that if one of our clients gets attacked, eventually everybody will get attacked with that same attack. It's just a matter of how much time it takes for that one attack, that sampling, that vertical market that they're going after, to then spread over everyone. So that statistical analysis, that real taking that math behind large amounts of data, like Dan mentioned and everybody's been mentioning today, and doing some smart stuff with that, really picking that stuff out. We need some really smart people doing that kind of work. And then first, of course, researchers, right? We have a whole dedicated team called the Counter Threat Union. I mean, it's a dream job. They sit there all day long and they're looking at what the attacker groups are saying, the blogs. They're going in the underground chat rooms, trying to figure out what's the next threat they're going to be facing. And that research arm of the industry is just short of people. I think somebody mentioned it, about 1,000 people. There's probably even smaller subset of people who can just do research. And so it's a real need out there. It's a fascinating space to be working in. Here's just a quick statistical snapshot, and even this is dated by the time it was written. 25,000 pieces of malware a day, and that sounds fascinating. Sounds like a big number, but then how do you work with that smartly? Well, you got to think about things like heuristics. Does this group of malware kind of look and act the same, but just built differently, right? That's the smart you have to put behind dealing with 25,000 pieces of malware, because you don't have 25,000 people who can sit there and really tear apart that malware individually. We need to build tools and sandboxes and really be able to automate a lot of this stuff. Monitoring the botnets, right? Those are those big, large collections of compromised systems that are sitting out there ready to take the next command, being preloaded with the tools. You have to be able to monitor that, to look at those tools, understand what the next thing is, so you can get ahead of it and stop that next threat against, not just industry. Everybody really faces that threat. Vulnerabilities, right, per business day. With all the software, the amount of mobile technology that we're using, there's a large amount of vulnerabilities being published each day that then can quickly be turned into an exploit and then be used against an industry. And then just really thousands and thousands of data points of security events that you need to take together and correlate, and again, find that spike of data and figure out what that means and how you're going to respond to it. We see, over 7 million IP addresses a year attack our clients, and that means that that's a large data set. Our company has collected an attack data set since about 2005. That's a really interesting data pile when you think about it. So every machine that's been seen attacking, of course, our client base, we've kind of indexed and then put in a database. And now, as we progress, we can kind of take that database and pull useful information out of it. That's useful information that hasn't even been fully capitalized on it yet. And we need people out there who are willing to take a data set like that and really make some more useful information out of it, or some more findings out of it. This has been beat up a little bit, but I tell you this, it's huge. Both mobility and cloud are just two areas that we fully don't understand. I'm going to use a little bit of a different angle than what Dan had just mentioned, which is, he's trying to figure out, how do I go in there and capture data sets to look what's happened with that's bad? We have a different perspective from the consulting industry side. How do you secure it? How do you keep bad things out of here, right? What does the cloud mean to you? It's probably one of the most abused words today in the security industry. I'm going in the cloud. We're in the cloud. And there's different meanings behind it, right? Is it software like, Twiki, the wikis, Wikipedias of the world? Is it things like rack space, like you host your physical servers at their location? It means a lot of different things out there to different people. But in the end, there's so many different moving parts in there, we have to really understand how these things impact our environment. I would say that the principles are pretty much the same, but there's a lot of new things we need to think about. And the same thing happens with mobile security. With all the mobile app technology that's out there, it's really hard to understand what your digital footprint is from the industry perspective. Where's your stuff backed up? where's it being hosted, who's securing it, how well is it secured. And so there's a lot of great challenges out there, and these are two great fields, both mobile and app, that I know. If you watch the news, Dell just said they're investing $1 billion in cloud. That's a good chunk of change, and that's just probably for somewhat their own selfish interest, right, as an industry. But certainly for the collective direction of where they're going, they're going to need people out there that can help them with that problem. And so I think the EDU environment is really the next generation of experts that can help us out there. So I talk real fast, but I figure that's good given the time constraint that we're in. What are we doing? It's a good fight. We're in that good fight. We are doing good stuff. We do know that the industry threats are increasing, and so are the needs. What we are doing is important. It is making a difference. We have a great analogy, a great statement, saying that we like to say: if we can make the cost of business go up for the adversary, then maybe they'll go on to something else. So as we try to defend our clients and help people in the industry deal with these problems, the biggest thing is to say, listen, instead of them knocking on your door and finding the one that's unlocked, keep your doors locked, and maybe they'll move down to find the unlocked doors. So making their costs go up is our general goal. And we hope, again, that things like the universities will have the next generation of industry experts. So without further ado, I appreciate your time.
Hi, my name is Fay-Wolfe, and I'm the director of the Digital Forensics Center here at URI. And I'm going to talk about what we're doing in cyber forensics here at URI. And I'd like to thank Alan that we're part of the good fight. So I'll show you what we're doing. We're a leading program, and what I mean by leading program is we were one of the first programs to address forensics as a security issue, and one of the first academic programs, and a number of other universities have followed. So that's what I mean by a leading academic program. One of the strengths of our program is a multi-pronged approach, and you can see in the diagram on the upper right, 3 prongs to what we do at URI. We have a teaching component, a service component, and a research component, all directed towards digital forensics. And I'm going to talk about each of those components, and you're going to see the interplay between them, and we think that's part of our strength. Just a couple of the highlights that we were the first degree program in digital forensics in a computer science department at a major university. We have a working forensics lab on campus. So we have a center where outside law enforcement and attorneys bring casework in, and I like to use the analogy of a teaching hospital, that we have on staff at the university experts in digital forensics, many of them being through our own program, trained by the curriculum that Special Agent Dickerman developed. We have them on campus, and we work cases. And the really neat thing is then our student interns work with our experts and get to see real cases. And from those cases, then we generate real research problems. So I like to use the analogy of a teaching hospital in that you'll often see when you walk into our lab an expert hunched over the computer with the hard drive and 3 interns behind watching how it's done. So we're helping to do training in that way. In terms of research, which I'll go into in a moment, we have the highest funding from the Department of Justice in digital forensics of any university in the country. You've seen a lot of the posters out in the lobby, and I'll mention a few of those briefly, and then I have one of our graduate students who's going to tell you a little depth on one of the projects. So our teaching program, as I mentioned, and Special Agent Dickerman mentioned, he came here from the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center and helped us develop our curriculum based on the way law enforcement was doing digital forensics. This was back in about 2004. Our curriculum is delivered completely online. This is the result of a National Science Foundation grant from their cyber capacity building program, where they ask us to broaden the impact of our academic program by letting people from all over the country take it. So we deliver our program completely online. We have innovative lecture techniques, innovative ways of getting evidence out to students so they get a hands-on feel for doing digital forensics. We have a number of courses in digital forensics, network forensics. We also are now branching into computer security, and I'll talk about some of the direction we're going. We have courses in computer security, but we're moving more into the traditional information assurance courses to combine it with the forensics. Our degree programs, we have an undergraduate minor, which can be done with any major. We have had majors from art, accountants, criminal justice. A lot of computer scientists take it as well. The right-hand column of my slide shows training. And this is outside of necessarily the academics. Academics is more about degree programs. Our training programs are focused on professionals, trying to get the workforce issues that Alan so eloquently brought forth, try to get those addressed through training. So we have what's called a professional certificate, where students who may not have an undergraduate degree and want to come to our graduate program can at least take courses and get certified from the University of Rhode Island in digital forensics. We also do more traditional training courses. We're partnered with the Rhode Island State Police in a program that's funded by some of the DHS money that Teresa talked about, where we're doing first responder training for all of the policemen in the state of Rhode Island. Our goal is to have every local policeman and state policeman trained in first responder. How do you handle a piece of digital evidence if you're a first responder? Is there a computer there? What do you do with it? Is there a cell phone there? What do you do with it? Not necessarily to make them analysts, but so that they can seize the evidence properly and bring it back to, usually in this state, it's to the Rhode Island State Police Computer Crimes Lab, which we'll also talk about in a moment. So we train. We hosted an event here 2 years ago. Actually, Congressman Langevin was our keynote speaker. It was part of the initial kickoff of what Teresa Murray talked about this morning, of getting the critical infrastructure providers in Rhode Island together. We had a tabletop exercise here at URI where we brought them in, posed scenarios to them. We followed up with training for those critical infrastructure providers, all part of the effort that Teresa talked about this morning, and this is some, a contribution from what we've done here at the university. We do training in advanced techniques for law enforcement. So we brought in all of the federal and local agents in the area. We've had Secret Service, FBI, IRS agents in the area come in. We'll do advanced forensic things like Linux systems that they may not be familiar with, some advanced file system things. We train them here because we have expertise in that, and we can lend it to them through training. And we have a very rich internship program, and I've listed some of them there, where we take our trained young computer scientists, people who are experts in the digital area, and pair them up often with law enforcement agencies who are clamoring to get this great young talent to work along with the law enforcement agents who know the procedures. And it's a really nice arrangement. Our students love it, and our partners love it. The second prong, you can see in the upper right corner, I have the kind of prongs going across. The second prong is our service prong, and I mentioned we have a center here on campus where we do casework. We have all of the top forensic software, hardware. Our lab is actually modeled after the FBI CART lab, and then a lab we built for the Rhode Island State Police. We have a similar structure in our own lab for handling evidence in a very innovative way, which I'll talk about in a moment. Our funding for the lab came originally from a congressional earmark, and now we are now self-funding. We actually do casework in a nonprofit way. We charge for it in what the university calls a service center. And by charging for casework, we're able to keep the professional staff here that does the cases, that the interns get to learn from, that generates the research problems. So it's a nice model. I mentioned some of the services that we do, take seized hard drives for lawyers. We work with law enforcement. The right-hand column talks about consulting. We designed the Rhode Island State Police Computer Crimes Lab, and I have a slide on that in a moment, so I'll talk about that. We're also the lead partner with the National Institute of Justice. NIJ is the research branch of the Department of Justice. We're their lead partner in their Center of Excellence. And so what we do there is things like we have a national study on a needs assessment for state and local law enforcement, where myself and some of my staff are going across the country, meeting with groups of law enforcement saying, what do you need in digital forensics? More training, more tools, what is it? And we're compiling this into a report that then goes to the NIJ to take to Congress to see what the funding priority should be. We're also have been named the cell phone analysis laboratory for the NIJ Center of Excellence. So in that, we have a lab over in Tyler Hall here on the university campus where we have all of the major cell phone analysis tools, and we have an arrangement with the #1 refurbisher of cell phones who's going to start sending us thousands of different kinds of cell phones so we can try the analysis tools out to see which ones do proper forensic analysis on which phones. And so that's one of our efforts through the Center of Excellence. Our center, we've done all kinds of cases, and I won't read them all here, but I just have a list of them. We worked murder cases, suicide cases, political corruption cases, where people will bring us the hard drives and we'll do analysis for them. The Rhode Island State Police Network is something we're very proud of. We work very closely with the Rhode Island State Police Computer Crimes Unit, which is the expertise for law enforcement in the state of Rhode Island. And you see a diagram on the right. This is basically based on the architecture of the FBI CART lab in Boston. We visited there, saw how they were doing evidence handling, and said, maybe we can do this for the entire state of Rhode Island. And some very foresighted people at the state police kind of bought into this idea, and we work with them, and my staff work with them to design and build the lab. And what you're seeing in the architecture on the right is that all evidence from state and local law enforcement in the state of Rhode Island is brought to the computer crimes unit in Situate, where state police computer crimes unit have a core of highly trained people who then put the evidence onto a large network server. This relieves the local law enforcement from having to be highly trained in this. They can be trained to be first responders and get the evidence, but they don't have to know how to handle it so it doesn't get corrupted for court. The state police handle that. And then what you see on the outside of the cloud is that the local officer who knows the case, they know the search terms, they know the people involved, they can go use the forensic tools to do the analysis of the case from their own computer over a highly secure network we've set up to the state police. Also, all of the very powerful, expensive forensic tools are hosted at the state police. So the entire state of Rhode Island can centralize their purchasing of these very costly forensic tools into just the state police, and not every local police department has to have this. It's a very nice model. It's a model that's being considered by the NIJ to be published as a national model for many regional centers. Our research, again, I mentioned, I'm just going to really quickly go through this. If you want details on it, I really suggest you stop by and see some of the posters that our graduate students have out in there. We're primarily funded by the U.S. Department of Justice, the National Institute of Justice. We also have substantial funding from the National Science Foundation. Some of our example research projects you can see out there. We have a tool called Red Light that we've released free to all state and local law enforcement. Red Light is a pornography scanner. You put it on your forensic workstation, you attach a drive to it, and it will go through and detect likely pornography using some very sophisticated computer science techniques. We use computer vision to go in and identify high concentrations of skin tones and edges. We then use machine learning to train it. So we've trained it with hundreds of thousands of images saying this is porn, this is not porn. It learns. And then the software, the Red Light software, can be deployed to the state and local law enforcement. It can go through the seized hard drive and report likely pornography. Our current take on this, which is something no one else is doing, is we're starting to help them look for child pornography, which is the real crime that law enforcement is often enforcing. So our porn detector will find porn, and that will cut down the problem. We actually are now using computer vision techniques to, when there's a face in any image on the computer, pull out the eyes, the nose, the mouth, and do proportions. We're actually working with Rhode Island Hospital, the lead pediatrician there. She's the one that testifies in court on a child porn case. We ask her, what do you use to determine whether it's a child or not? She gave us the medical dimensions. We use computer vision techniques to pull the facial features out and use the dimensions that she gave us that have been proven in the medical field to be indicative of a child. So combined with a porn detector, a child detector can then really make law enforcement's job easier in finding child pornography. And that's on a seized drive. We also are working on putting it into software that can go out onto the internet and go into peer-to-peer sharing sites and places like that to see if they are repositories for child pornography. So that's one of our research projects. You'll see other ones out there. We mentioned for cloud forensics several times. Because of our work with state and local law enforcement, we know this is a problem. We just, in the past year, have initiated a research project on it. You can see the poster out there where we are going to help them get the remnants they need to direct warrants to the keeper of records at Amazon, Google, this kind of thing. And so you can see the tool ideas and the research progress in one of our posters outside. And the last thing I have up here is steganography detection, which I'm going to let Kevin Bryan, my graduate student, talk about in just a moment. So we have a very rich research program here in digital forensics that goes along with our teaching and service. We're very proud of our workforce transitions. As I mentioned, the entire panel that you see here, every one of them is a URI graduate. We transition our work. I heard Doug Mon this morning talk about research dying on the vine. We don't let that happen here. We're very pragmatic in our research. We work very closely with state and local law enforcement. So we've transitioned work that's been done by Ching Yang in the electrical and engineering department in data security. The patent has been bought by the Trap Data Group, an East Providence company, which is going to make it into a real product. Software write blocking and Windows boot disks, the only ones in the world, were developed here at the University of Rhode Island. It's been transitioned to a local startup company that was spun off from the university called Forensic Soft, and it's selling it nationwide to worldwide to law enforcement. Our steg detection stuff that Kevin will be talking about has been transitioned to Whetstone. Whetstone is the leading steganography detection tool that law enforcement use. They took our stuff and put it into their tool to give it much greater capabilities, and you'll see what those are in a moment when Kevin talks to you. So that's some of the transition of our research. We are also trying to help address the workforce issues, and you've seen that some of our graduates are in prominent positions. But we have people at PricewaterhouseCoopers, small forensics agencies, law enforcement. We are doing our best to graduate students that can help with the workforce issues you've heard about. Our newest direction is towards a cybersecurity center. What I've been talking about so far is the notion of mostly digital forensics, which is where we've built our expertise. But the next step is to start to go into what we've been hearing more and more about, this motion towards cyber forensics, where it's not just traditional computer forensics, but there's the entire internet component, which brings in security, information assurance. Now, we have some courses here at the university, but to really move this forward like we did with digital forensics, we're going to use a model similar to the Digital Forensics Center, where we're going to increase our courses. We have a number of faculty. We've talked to some of these people here who are experts to bring in adjunct faculty to help teach these courses to provide real-world courses in the newest areas of network security, information assurance, building on our strength in digital forensics. That's the teaching component. We have a proposal in to do a service component where the university would be the service center for the entire state of Rhode Island to go out, and many of you saw the catchphrase on some of our publications out here, you're only as strong as your weakest link. Well, the model here is that the university can be a resource to go out to senior citizen centers and train about strength of passwords, about phishing schemes, to go out to schools and train. A lot of the investment has been in the critical infrastructure, which is absolutely essential. But you're only as strong as your weakest link. There are many small firms in Rhode Island who are DoD contractors or provide some service to keep Rhode Island going. Very small, 3-4 people operations. Maybe they can't afford the security that a critical infrastructure grant would provide. Maybe the state university should be helping them. So that's the service component that we're envisioning for the next step of our center. And the research component you're actually going to hear about in the next session, where Dr. DePippo and Dr. Yan will talk about, Dr. Sun will be talking about where their research in trust-based computing, which is a real strength area at UI, is going to be the research component of our cybersecurity. So that's a quick summary. We have a table outside that talks about our academic program, and we have our posters outside. But a quick summary of where we are and where we're going with our program here at the university. My contact information is up there, but I'm going to have Kevin Bryan, one of our Ph.D. students, come up, and he'll just give you a very short talk on one of our research projects so you can see some idea what a university research project in cyber forensics space is.
Thank you, Vic. All right, so I'm going to talk about steg analysis, or detecting hidden evidence in digital media files. And a few people that stopped at my poster said that they've learned at least one or maybe two new words today. One of them is steg analysis. The other is one of the words that comes out of it, which is steganography. So steganography is the idea of hiding a message in plain sight. That is taking something that looks like a normal communication, whether it's an email or posting an image somewhere, and hiding a message in there for someone to decode from the other side, but in a way where, unlike encryption, where in encryption it's clear if I send you an encrypted email that I have sent it to you, and who the sender and receiver is very clear. With steganography, I'm trying to obscure that. So when I post an image on Flickr, thousands of people will view it, and you don't know who is actually receiving a message from it. And what kinds of messages can you send with this? Mostly short messages or images could be stored. Stolen credit card information. If you work inside a company that has access to people's credit card numbers, you can embed those and email them away, or there have been foreign intelligence services that have used it. There was a case, I think, last year where some Russian spies were sending messages using steganography tools developed from Moscow Central. And then there's trade secrets from inside companies, not just personal information like stolen credit cards, but trade secrets and whatnot could be stolen. So here's an example where there are two images, and if you look no matter how carefully you look at them, you're not going to decide which one of these has a hidden message in it. I was thinking I should have put a hidden message in both of them because you still wouldn't know. And how does that work? Well, in order to know how that works, let's talk about how the computer actually stores an image. So the most basic way would be that it just stores values. If you look very closely at your computer screen, you'll see red, green, and blue pixels. And it could just store those individual values, so some intensity value for each of those colors. But the most common image format that we use is called JPEG, and the most common video format is MPEG or some variation thereof. And what they do is something very smart for compression purposes. They transform those data, or that data, from what's called the spatial domain into a frequency domain using discrete cosine transform. But the idea is to reduce the amount of data. So you see the blocks of numbers over there where most of them are zeros and the rest of them are fairly small numbers. This makes it very easy to compress the image. So you can take what would be a couple megabytes and bring it down to 100K or a couple 100K. And it's done in 8x8 block chunks. So here's an example where I've taken, this is actually in the spatial domain, so this is just an 8x8 block of a picture. And I took and I modified the DCT values of, in this case, all of the non-zero ones by 1. And you can actually detect, in this case, a very small change. If you look in the upper left-hand corner of the two boxes, you'll notice the one on the right is a little bit brighter. It looks more like the other three around it. Now here it's visible because the amount of change that I put in, a real steganography program would actually make less change to the image. So steganalysis is trying to detect that this has occurred, okay? And what we do there is we take the values that were used, the very same values that have been changed, and we look for ways to detect that change. So when you've done a change, you're introducing what would be called noise into the image, and you can pull that out by looking at some very specific statistics, such as the distribution of those values, looking at distributions of pairs of values, and looking at the difference of values between blocks. And my work is in particular in video steganalysis, which works fairly similarly to the images, but there's even more data, more complexity to it, because really a video is a series of images, and the way that they get encoded is somewhat different, but a lot of the same techniques will work. So I'm looking at ways to exploit some of that self-similarity between the image frames to detect video steg. Steganalysis is done in 2 steps with this approach. There's a pre-processing step where we'll take the actual tools that do the steganography, and we'll take some clean images that we've either taken with a camera or whatever, and we'll embed data into those images. Okay. Then we'll use our tools to pull out the statistics of those coefficients from both the clean and the stegged files. And we can build then what's called a statistical model or a machine learning model for that data. And that will enable us to then do a classification step. The classification step comes when we go to do an investigation. We believe that someone has been using steganography on their machine, and we want to see which images have they embedded data in it. So we use our statistical model. We collect those same statistics that we use to build the model for that particular image, and use that to predict whether or not the image has any data embedded in it. The accuracy that we've gotten so far is around 95%, down to 20% embedding rate. What I mean by 20% embedding rate is, given a particular image, there's a capacity of that image that where you could put so much data in before you are changing the size of the image or something. So you, given that maximum theoretical capacity, we can bring that effective capacity down to 20% by saying we can detect it down to 20%, so you need to do less than that to become undetectable. And as Vic has mentioned, this is some of this technology we've transferred to Whetstone for the use in their Sego Suite application. And that's my talk.
So I'll leave the names of the speakers up here, so and they'll stay on the stage. So if you would want to direct a question to a particular speaker, please do. So we have 5 minutes. Do we have some questions? Yes.
I'd like to direct a question to Alan White. I think it was Jeff that talked about some collaboration that goes on amongst government agencies. On the civilian side of things, do you envision a collaboration between industry groups, or is there anything that's going on right now?
Oh, there's a mic there.
I would say that where we see a lot of collaboration is when a lot of like vertical markets get together and hold their own symposiums. We see that in the critical infrastructure industry. They hold meetings where they get together, exchange what challenges they're facing. They kind of have a smaller opportunity to kind of collaborate on the efforts taken to defend their environments. They tend to have more open conversations. We see that kind of at the community or regional area throughout the United States, at least. That's where we see it. It's just these consortiums that seem to do a lot of the collaboration. I don't know that if there's a better approach to that, but we do see that, sir.
Yes.
My question is for Jeffrey Troy. You mentioned the outsourcing of risk with regard to data, and I'm wondering, is anybody thinking about the fact that that didn't work that well in the financial industry? I'm thinking of the mortgages and like that when you don't have any skin in the game, it's not going to work out. Or is anybody thinking about that?
Well, that's exactly the point that I was trying to highlight. Again, those terms of service, we really recommend that people take a look at that, because if the person that you're outsourcing your risk to provides you no more comfort, then why would you do that? And it's remarkable how many people continue to talk about the cost efficiencies of the cloud. It's the same thing with why you use the internet. So we're on an unstable platform, and the decisions are being made for economy as opposed to security. And we just need to change people's understanding of that, because they're putting their risk, they're putting their business reputation and even potentially the ability to stay in business at risk for a short-term cost saving.
Yes. So the question is, has the university in our efforts look at the hardware side of things? In what sense? Producing hardware, doing forensics on hardware?
Yeah, counterfeit,
Yes. Well, one of our research projects, we created what's called a Windows boot disk, and we also have a software write blocker. In that particular instance, one of the ways that evidence can be hidden by a very clever person is to use what's called the HPA, or the host protected area of a disk. So when you get a hard drive and Windows reports to you that you have a 200 gig hard drive, it probably is bigger than that, because Windows only sees part of the hard drive, and the other part can be a host protected area or device configuration overlay area. There's more space. They use for things like backup operating systems for recovery. Well, clever criminals will store information there. So we actually work very closely with the hardware people in the electrical engineering department, who are the experts in disks and low-level stuff, because in the digital forensics, you have to know the law enforcement side of it, you have to know the software side, but you have to know the hardware side, because things like the HPA is something that's actually done in the firmware, which is really considered a hardware portion of it, and that's a very clever way that they use hardware technology to hide evidence. So part of what we do we have to be very good at hardware. Our first course, some of you may be A+ certified. A+ is the certification that computer techs go through. We actually show our students A+ stuff because they have to be really good at knowing about computer hardware, because it's that hardware and the nuances of it that have the evidence stored on it. So that's kind of a long answer to yes, we do some things with hardware. All right, that's it. Thank you.